and gentlemen, and welcome to this very special segment on a very special day, the 21st of June. And right now in this beautiful part of Brisbane, it's 13 degrees. And once again, I'd like to welcome everyone who's just joining in, because this morning we had the live coverage of the International Day of Yoga at the Gabba, and it's wonderful, and thanks everyone for joining in into that live coverage coming to you all the way from the Gabba. Well, right now in this segment we have the news update, and of course we will be finishing off with the Daily India report. Well, right now let's get into the news for the first one. Let's go to Canberra, and they're talking about Mr. Fluffy's asbestos, and they're still talking about it after all those years.
Most Canberrans would associate Mr. Fluffy with asbestos contamination and demolition. But for Dr. Sue Packer, it's about the families.
Families who all thought they were in established homes where they were going to be for the rest of their lives until they chose to do differently. And their lives were suddenly totally upended. Above all is this background fear of this really quite hot, dreadful disease which is fatal.
She's worked with those families through the ACT Government's Community and Expert Reference Group, which was launched in 2014 as part of the Asbestos Removal Task Force, and then Chief Minister Katy Gallagher's commitment to bring the community along with this huge and rapid change.
So it combined the experts who knew about asbestos and its removal, together with community members, some of whom were directly affected with Mr. Fluffy in their homes.
8 years and over 1,000 affected properties later, the government has decided to formally close the task force on June 30th and replace it with a smaller coordination team.
We have still got issues that we are managing, but it's a very different in terms of scale and scope.
The smaller team will help manage the 20 affected homes in private ownership and a handful of government-owned properties in various stages of demolition, along with the buyback scheme. Dr. Packer counts mandatory asbestos awareness training for tradespeople as a positive outcome of the saga, and says the government has learned important lessons.
Being reminded that we can end up doing something with enthusiasm and regretting it, and to give some thought at the outset.
Affected homeowners have until 2025 to eradicate the asbestos. After that, there's a provision for compulsory acquisition of properties. Emmy Groves, ABC News, Canberra.
And it is, when you look at it, that has been going on for a very, very long time. And that reporting, when we look at today, so now they have put in a deadline, and after that, the government can move in and just take your house if you haven't done the right thing by then. So the onus is on everyone to just do the right thing as soon as you can. So, well, right now the government is defending its plan to allow coal and gas to ensure energy supply. So now, of course, we know we have the energy crisis, and if we are looking at alternate sources of energy, you have to make sure that those alternative sources are up, ready to go before we pull the plug on the old conventional ways.
Blackouts averted, but the East Coast energy crisis persists.
We have some way to go. There's no complacency. We're very alive to the risks that remain in the system.
As a solution to some of those risks,
we will develop a capacity mechanism which works for the task at hand, which is to ensure reliability.
The Energy Security Board has been tasked with designing the mechanism, which would require energy retailers to pay generators for additional capacity when demand is high. In a draft plan released today, the board says coal and gas generators should be included in the scheme.
What we really want to see is this orderly transition, so we just don't want customers to be left without the power that they need.
And if designed right, it would not hold back the switch to renewables.
We have multiple principles, one of which is to ensure continued emissions reduction.
Ultimately, state and territory governments would be left to decide. Victoria's vowed not to allow payments to flow to fossil fuels.
Our position has consistently been that the priority should be given to and preference should be given to renewable energy.
In New South Wales, which narrowly avoided blackouts last week, gas would be included, in line with the state's electricity infrastructure roadmap.
Obviously, we need to make sure that we've got enough dispatchable capacity to keep the lights on and the system going.
Paying coal and gas corporations to stay in the system for longer isn't just throwing good money after bad. It will make the problem worse.
The difficulty with energy policy is balancing reliability, affordability and the need to reduce carbon emissions. This mechanism is aimed at ensuring the system is reliable, but the Federal Energy Minister's promising it'll also support the government's target to slash emissions by 43% by 2030.
It will complement our emissions reduction target, not contradict.
But it won't deliver immediate changes. It's not due to be implemented until after 2025. Noor Haider, ABC News, Canberra.
So there you are. As I mentioned before, that you need to make sure that your alternate supplies are up and ready to fill in the demands of the grid before you pull the plug on the old conventional method. Right now, we'll move on and let's go and take a look around the country and see what else is happening. So first of all, let's go to New South Wales and look at what provisions have been made in the budget.
He's poised to deliver his first budget. And the Treasurer is promising an ambitious agenda.
It's going to be a budget focused on reform, focused on managing the state's finances responsibly and setting us up for a more prosperous future.
Matt Keane's last pre-budget reveal is $400 million to deal with the elective surgery backlog. There's currently 18,000 people waiting because of a slowdown caused by COVID, and the government wants to get through them over the next 18 months. But to do it, more staff will have to be found, and they'll have to work some nights and on the weekend. The plan is to also use private hospitals.
There will be a challenge, let's say that up front, but if we don't start by getting the money, then we're behind the eight ball, and we've got the money now.
$500 million has also been announced to help boost housing supply by funding infrastructure in new land release areas.
Mr Perrottet and Mr Keane have spent a cumulative total of $37.5 billion in new initiatives to be reported in tomorrow's budget.
The spending lays the groundwork for the government's election run. The big-ticket items have been childcare and boosting the health workforce. The budget will also include reforms to stamp duty, which will likely impact revenue. But the Treasurer has foreshadowed there will be saving measures.
They need to come up with a plan to offset their spending splurge. Otherwise, all it will do is put more pressure on interest rates.
What's responsible is that we're spending on things that are going to improve the productive capacity of the economy.
Strategic spending 9 months out from an election. Ashley Rape.
And that will be something to see how and where we end up with the final figures that come out. Well, right now from New South Wales, let's go to ICT.
Not quite back to normal, but getting closer. After a tough 2 years, the tourism industry in the capital is turning around. Hoteliers say visitors are coming for both work and play.
We needed them to be back in the office, so then after they were there for a month or so, they wanted to take a trip and get out of the office.
The Territory Government says more than 300,000 people came to the Enlighten Festival in March, up more than 400% on last year. More major events this week are keeping people coming. Local government representatives from across the country are meeting in Canberra for 4 days, and players have already arrived ahead of the Women's State of Origin on Friday.
It's actually quite a large part of the reason that people travel is travelling to, something that's aligned with their passion, so events or something they're particularly interested in.
But corporate travellers are among the most valuable, in many cases staying for up to a week.
But it also means that there are people in Canberra spending money in retail outlets and through other parts of the economy, which is great for everyone.
While businesses like what they're seeing, they're still struggling to find enough staff to cater for these travellers. They also know the domestic market alone won't get the industry back to pre-pandemic levels.
That was driven by a very strong level of international tourism with direct international flights into Canberra that we don't yet have.
Green shoots for the tourism sector, which still have room to grow. Patrick Bell, ABC News.
There is always room for improvement as they reckon, but it is still good to see that there are things that are happening and, you know, lot more people out and about and moving as well. Well, right now, let's go to South Australia.
Strapping in to new bullet and knife-proof vests, 1,500 of them rolling out across the force, a 50% increase, as rates for some crime return to pre-pandemic levels.
These vests ensure that the best levels of protection are there all the time.
But protection for the public could sometimes be better.
They've called the police and sometimes the police don't turn up at all.
The force is struggling to recruit enough officers and has cancelled 3 cadet intakes. The staffing problem causing issues with a new policing model, which effectively splits officers into 2 groups, one to respond to crime, the other to prevent it.
I'm certainly happy to acknowledge that it's not properly staffed at the moment because of the challenges with COVID and also with our recruiting issues.
He's acknowledged that there is not enough staff to police the model. He knows that we won't have enough staff for the next 12 to 24 months, but he's continuing with a failed model.
The new government set up a task force to find a way to fix the staffing problem. The opposition says 169 protective security officers employed for temporary COVID duties should be extended.
They have been defunded, so we see a double whammy with less police officers, less security officers, and now the opportunity with 3 cancelled cadet intakes.
The previous government employed and recruited those PSOs on contract. We will have recommendations out of the Premier's task force well and truly before those contracts are completed.
While he struggles for new staff, the Police Commissioner is keen to use other policing tools at his disposal. Grant Stevens has indicated police will use facial recognition technology about to be installed in Adelaide's CCTV network, despite concerns that its use has not been regulated.
The government favours a national approach to this. The Attorney-General has spoken already today regarding the need for federal momentum. That will take some months though.
The Adelaide City Council is set to vote on the installation of the new system at the end of this month. Evelyn Leckie, ABC News, Adelaide.
So there you are, ladies and gentlemen, up to date on Australian Indian Radio. And of course, right now, as we know, that there is a nationwide staff shortage. So what is happening with that? Workers are, calling for better conditions.
There's no traffic on Leah's commute. She loves her job at a cafe on a ski run at Mount Hotham in Victoria.
The friends, the community, coming back to work and seeing everybody again, it's amazing.
But with a severe shortage of workers, she's at the cafe by day and at a different restaurant at night.
Full day would usually be here by 7:30 and knock off at the other job maybe 11, 12 o'clock and start all over again the next day.
Finding staff hasn't been easy.
We had to go fair way around Australia to try and find our staff. Queensland, Tasmania, Victoria.
Mount Hotham's ski lift operator has to lure 600 employees to work in a beautiful but difficult place.
It becomes about reinvigorating the passion for people about living and working in a very atypical environment in Australia.
On the slopes and far from them, Australia is suffering a nationwide labour shortage.
It's across all industries, all locations and all professions.
There's more than 420,000 jobs vacant.
And it's a record high by a pretty significant degree. If we look back to, say, February 2020, just before the pandemic, there are only around 227,000 job vacancies.
One reason is we closed our international border during the pandemic.
Pre-COVID, our overseas migration was something in the realm of around 235,000 workers a year. Those workers are no longer here, they're no longer coming.
They're trickling back, but it's not enough.
There are no simple answers to our nationwide shortage of workers, but there are levers that governments can pull. Currently, childcare is so expensive it's a disincentive to work.
Our unemployment payments are so low that people on them struggle to be ready to rejoin the workforce. And inside our tax and welfare systems are penalties for pensioners and parents who work more.
If we try to fix one problem with, be it thresholds or tax changes or whatever else, we impose another problem that's in there.
A key issue, particularly in regional and coastal areas, is accommodation. The Hoff Hut is on the snow, but its workers stay at a house the owners are renting through winter at huge expense.
The extra costs up front that we have to fork out to secure the accommodation for our staff, that's the biggest killer for us.
The lift company has to find beds for almost 90% of its workers. And the problem isn't just the money.
We're displacing the accommodation that would otherwise be available to people who are looking to come and enjoy themselves here.
One solution is to get available workers to take on more hours.
Encouraging people to be fully employed and to consider all their options in the way that they can contribute to the teams.
That's what Leah is doing. She's about to get her first break after 12 days.
Most of my friends that I know do have 2 or 3 jobs. Morning coffees and shaking cocktails by night.
In a climate that rewards hard work.
For one, I'm all for rewarding hard work. Yes, as they say, fair remuneration for a fair day's work. So fair is fair. It needs to be fair all the way around. And then only will it work. Well, right now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to go to our daily India report.
Welcome to the Daily India Report that brings you reports, interviews, features and much more on India and the Indian diaspora. Indian officials say the delegation has triumphed at the 12th WTO Ministerial Conference. The World Trade Organization's 12th Ministerial Conference was described by the Indian Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal as an outcome-oriented success. He said India was able to defend its interests and those of the developing world at the global level. The International Trade Regulating Body also won back its relevance 9 years after the most important trade agreement was reached at Bali's 2013 conference, allowing seamless movement of international goods. While India, an emerging economy, secured and celebrated the deals, other WTO members were forced to soften their stand as the 4-day high-level meeting that began on 12th June appeared to be headed towards a roadblock. Desperate to ensure that global decision-making is not derailed by differences in the backdrop of the Ukraine-Russian war, countries engaged in intense discussions for 2 more days to arrive at a compromise. India's demands were the sticking points for several days. But beating back the criticism, Goyal told a press conference in Geneva, few countries attempted to create a false campaign initially on 19th and 20th June that India is obstinate, due to which no progress is being made. The real situation has emerged before us all. All issues raised by India, on which Prime Minister had asked us to focus upon, now the whole world acknowledges that was the correct agenda, and ultimately India played a vital role in arriving at all solutions. WTO Director General called the decisions made at Geneva package unprecedented. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Karnataka state for 2 days. 75 ministers to attend Yoga Day events at 75 locations in India. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is on a 2-day visit to Karnataka state from 20th June, during which he will launch several development projects and also take part in the International Yoga Day on 21st June. Integrating Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav with the Yoga Day, Prime Minister's office said that mass yoga demonstrations will be organized at 75 iconic locations across the country under the leadership of 75 union ministers, with Modi attending the exercise at Mysore. Their yoga demonstrations will also be held by various educational, social, political, cultural, religious, corporate and other civil society organizations and will be attended by crores of people across the country, it said. Modi's yoga program is also part of the novel program Garden Yoga Ring, which is a collaborative exercise among 79 countries and United Nations organizations along with the Indian missions abroad to illustrate yoga's unifying power surpassing boundaries. As the sun moves from the east to west across the world, the mass yoga demonstrations in the participating countries, if seen from any one point on the earth, will seem to be happening one after the other almost in tandem, thus underlining the concept of one sun, one earth. India reports 12,781 new COVID-19 cases in last 24 hours and weekly cases reach a record high in 4 months. India on June 20th recorded 12,781 new COVID-19 cases in the last 24 hours while the active caseload reached 76,700. A statement of the Health Ministry said the daily positivity rate reached 4.32% while the weekly positivity rate was recorded at 2.62%. The weekly COVID-19 cases in the country surged to a record high in 4 months with around 80,000 new infections recorded in the last 7 days, a 62% rise registered over the previous 7-day tally. The death due to the virus in the week ending June 19 remained low at 93, which was more than the combined toll in the last 2 weeks. The new cases in the last 7 days, June 13 to 19, was 79,250, while the tally in the previous 7 days was 48,769. The 7-day tally has been the highest since February 21st to 27th, when the infections reached 86,000. The country has been registering increasing cases in the last 30 days, but the last 2 weeks have seen an accelerated surge. The fresh cases in the country rose in the most of the states and the union territories in the last 7 days. Maharashtra state, reporting the maximum cases, showed 4,004 fresh COVID-19 cases, including 2,087 in Mumbai and 1 fatality. The state reported 25,172 weekly cases, up from 17,380 in the previous week. A day earlier, the state had reported 3,883 cases and 2 COVID-19 fatalities. Maharashtra is now left with 23,746 active cases after 3,085 patients were discharged on June 19th, taking the tally of recoveries to 77,64,117. On the other hand, Kerala state recorded 2,786 fresh COVID-19 cases, a slight dip from the over 3,000 cases it was reported in the last 5 days. The case load is 66,01,884 to date. The weekly cases reached 20,500 in the state, while the active cases increased to 22,278. Huge gathering receives the Kargil victory flame in J&K's Ramban. School children turned up in large numbers to receive the Kargil victory flame at Dharmund in Ramban district of Jammu and Kashmir on June 19th. The Kargil Victory Flame Run, which will traverse a journey of 400 kilometers in 40 days, was flagged off from Northern Army headquarters in Udhampur on 17 June as a part of the run-up events to commemorate Kargil Vijay Divas, which is celebrated every year on July 26 to pay tribute to soldiers who took part in 1999 Kargil War. In the run-up to commemorate 23 years of Kargil victory, the army at Dharmund celebrated the event with full zeal, the spokesperson said. The event exhibited a patriotic fervour among the children and remembered the brave hearts who made supreme sacrifices for the nation during the war. Army paid homage to their fallen heroes as a general officer commanding counter-insurgency force along with the troops laid wreaths at the Dharmund War Memorial, the spokesman said. The GOC extended greetings to all ranks of the force and exhorted them to strive towards greater glory and success with self-belief and pride in their profession. The Kargil Victory Flame will traverse the force area till June 26 and further move to Dras in Ladakh, where it will be merged with the eternal flame at Kargil War Memorial on July 26th. Eight more people lose their lives in Assam floods, and over 37 lakh people were affected across 30 districts. The flood situation in Assam state deteriorated on 19 June, with 8 more persons losing their lives and over 37 lakh people suffering across 30 districts. According to the Assam State Disaster Management Authority, 3 persons died due to landslides and 5 people drowned at different places during the day. The flood in the state has led to water levels of Brahmaputra rising every minute in Dibrugarh district. At least 4 persons went missing after a boat capsized in Brahmaputra River in Assam's Dibrugarh district on June 20th. As per reports, 9 people were travelling in the country boat fitted with a motor when it capsized at Rahamaria near Chabua. 5 persons swam to the bank while 4 are still missing. We have called the NDRF, which is carrying out an extensive search in the entire area and downstream, the police told PTI. According to the latest updates by the Assam State Disaster Management Authority, the state was witnessing floods and landslides for the last 6 days, leaving behind a huge trail of destruction everywhere. In the last 24 hours, 32 districts comprising 118 revenue circles and 4,291 villages have been reported flooding. Sri Lanka to resume flights from Jaffna to India in July. Sri Lanka will resume flights from the northern Jaffna Peninsula to India next month, the Aviation Minister Nirmal Siripala De Silva said, asserting that the move would support the country's tourism industry and help in easing the economic crisis. Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority plans to attract 800,000 tourists during the rest of the year. The northern Jaffna Peninsula's Palolem Airport is to resume flights to India from next month, the Aviation Minister Nirmal Siripala De Silva said on 18 June. However, he did not specify a date. Resuming the flights would improve tourism and help the country in current dollar crisis, De Silva said after inspecting the airport. The press runway can only accommodate 75-seater flights and therefore needs to be extended, he said. He hoped for Indian assistance for runway improvements. The airport was named Jaffna International Airport in October 2019. The first international flight to land there was from Chennai in Tamil Nadu. The 2019 redevelopment of the airport was funded by both Sri Lanka and India. Earlier, India's Alliance Air conducted 3 weekly flights from Chennai to Palolem. However, after government change in Sri Lanka in November 2019, the flight operations were halted. Sri Lanka is currently facing its worst economic crisis since independence from Britain in 1948. The economic crisis has prompted an acute shortage of essential items like food, medicine, cooking gas and other fuel, toilet paper and even matches, with Sri Lankans being forced to wait in lines lasting hours outside stores to buy fuel and cooking gas. Karan Johar announces premiere date of Coffee with Karan Season 7. Filmmaker Karan Johar on June 19 said the 7th season of his celebrity chat show Coffee with Karan will arrive on Disney Plus Hotstar on July 7. The director took to Twitter to share the announcement. Guess who's back, and this time with some hot piping crew. Hotstar specials #Coffee with Karan S7 starts 7 July only on Disney Plus Hotstar, Johar wrote on Twitter. He also shared a mashup video of the previous seasons of the popular show. Coffee with Karan Season 7 is back, this time exclusively on Disney Plus Hotstar. It's going to be bigger, better and more beautiful. Please stay tuned, the director said in the clip. The show first premiered on the TV channel Star World in 2004 and ran for 6 seasons on the small screen till 2019. On the film front, Johar is awaiting the release of his upcoming directorial Rocky Aur Rani Ki Prem Kahani on February 10, 2023. He has also announced action film, his next movie as a director. That's all in today's bulletin.
And ladies and gentlemen, that's about all we have for you in this segment. I hope that you have enjoyed the daily news. But right now, let's finish off with our functions and events for today, and let's see what's in store.
challenges. It will create good, honest jobs. And it will deliver better services for the people of our great state. There's not a long wait now, Mr Speaker, but here's a sneak peek of some of the highlights. A record investment in health, Mr Speaker, the likes of which Queenslanders have never seen before in our history. Record investments in education, jobs and renewables. And record investments in community essentials like police.
Order. Members to my left. I'll wait for silence, members. The Premier has the call.
And record investments in community essentials like police, fire and emergency services. In addition, we've already announced $4 million to develop Indigenous tourism experiences throughout our state, $35.5 million to build a new medical manufacturing facility in Brisbane, creating local manufacturing jobs, $200 million to build more houses, creating thousands of jobs and opportunities for construction, more than $300 million to build the Toowoomba to Warwick pipeline, delivering water security for the Granite Belt and Southern Downs, while creating around 420 local jobs. $5.7 million for a further expansion of the Mackay Resource Centre of Excellence, ensuring more Queenslanders have the skills they need to pursue a career in the resources sector. $15 million to expand the National Battery Testing Centre to support jobs making renewable batteries in Queensland. $750 million to build a state-of-the-art Queensland Cancer Centre at Hurston, Mr Speaker. $13.6 million to build a new screen studio in Cairns, creating jobs and opportunities in the screen industry for the people of far north Queensland. And $3.5 billion for rail projects, as announced by the Treasurer and Minister for Transport over the weekend. Mr Speaker, Queenslanders...
Member for Kawana. Member for Kawana. We'll cease his interjections. Premier has the call.
And don't worry, Mr Speaker, in September we mark 10 years of the Newman budget, Mr Speaker. 10 years. 10 years. There's a record we're not going to forget, Mr Speaker. So we'll... that's right. That's right. That's right. There we go. That's a good record to remember. Queenslanders haven't forgot that record, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, Queenslanders have shown incredible resilience in the last 2 years. Their hard work has meant that our economy has recovered faster than any other jurisdiction. Queensland has the strongest jobs growth in the nation, coming out of a pandemic with 206,000 jobs created. Queensland's domestic economy is outpacing the nation, and our exports are now at a record $99 billion, Mr. Speaker. And our strong economic management has now created the budget position we need to make a historic investment in good jobs, better services and embracing our great Queensland lifestyle. Mr Speaker, last week National Cabinet met in Canberra, and to those opposite, I went to that as well, Mr Speaker. Although some of the faces have changed, Although some of the faces have changed, the job remains the same, working together in the interests of the people of our state and our nation. Mr Speaker, I can report that this was the best National Cabinet meeting ever. What a pleasure. What a pleasure. What a pleasure it was to meet in a spirit of cooperation. And what a pleasure it was to work with a Labor Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is keen to work with every state and territory, Mr Speaker, including New South Wales and Tasmania. He wants to put people first, Mr Speaker. Our first priority is health. As a group, we were able to announce the extension of special funding to assist with issues being felt in almost every public hospital in Australia. Some of these pressures are being caused by the ongoing pandemic. Although we would like to work towards a greater contribution from the federal government, this was an important first step and a welcome one, Mr Speaker. This includes working together to identify practical ways to get people out of hospitals and into aged and disability care sooner. In Queensland alone, this would free up as many as 500 beds. And let me say to the opposition that this is a national issue. that every state and territory addressed, Mr Speaker. The Commonwealth agreed to address a backlog in visa applications. Mr Speaker, we also addressed another shared concern, a critical skills shortage. The Commonwealth agreed to address a backlog in visa applications to just rude.
Members to my left will cease their interjections. The Premier is making a ministerial statement. Premier, you have the call.
The Commonwealth has agreed to address a backlog in visa applications to reduce the amount of time skilled migrants are waiting to come into Australia and to prioritise training that will address these skills shortages, Mr Speaker. Many of these skills shortages are in regional Queensland and rural Queensland, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, we also gave our commitment to progress a referendum to enshrine in our Constitution a First Nations voice to Parliament, Mr Speaker. Every state, premier and territory leader, Mr Speaker. We gave a commitment for energy ministers to continue working together to improve outcomes for consumers, to further streamline disaster recovery funding arrangements and measures to boost productivity across all sectors, and to a reduction in Australia's greenhouse gas emissions of 43% below 2005 levels by 2030. The Prime Minister is also investigating ways to add a representative of local government in National Cabinet meetings. Mr Speaker, we achieved a lot. As I frequently say, we work best when we work together. And I look forward to the next National Cabinet meeting prior to the federal budget in October. And finally, Mr Speaker, 1 year ago, on Budget Day coincidentally, we welcomed what looked like good news from the former federal coalition government, bridging visas being granted to the Nadasalingam family. It turned out to be a false hope. They were not going home to Biloela that day. They had to remain in Western Australia and remain in doubt. A long way from central Queensland and from the friends they'd known for 7 years. I said that day we look forward to when the family would all be allowed to come home to Billo. Mr Speaker, it took a change of government in Canberra, but 12 months later the good news is...
Member for Everton. Order. Members to my right. Premier has the call.
The family is back in Biloela, back in the community which embraced them, which campaigned for them and raised money for them. And they know that under the Albanese government they can continue in Biloela with certainty. It's a wonderful outcome. Order. It's a wonderful outcome for this family who have persevered through so much. It's thanks to the new federal Labor government. But today I want to emphasise a point in particular. This is a tribute to the love and spirit of the people of Biloela. How moving it was to see the emotional welcome, the cheers and the tears of joy. And I want to thank Minister Glenn Butcher for going out there that weekend as well. Thank you very much for representing the government. Council workers even spent the morning making sure the airport was spick and span for the arrival. As a state, we can all be proud of a Queensland community.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll leave that there. As we know, it's budget day, and tomorrow we'll bring to you all the findings and see what's happened. So, the Premier has just finished her speech around the introduction of the budget, which will be handed down later today. So it's budget day. Well, thank you so much for joining in the two segments this morning. The live coverage of International Yoga Day came to you live from the Gabba. And what a wonderful event it was, to see that this initiative of Narendra Modi now taking the world by storm, wherever, we have our missions, that they all go out. And so the iconic sports have been chosen, and what better place than the Gabba to be chosen for that. So it was wonderful to see that happening under the 75th Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, under that the theme, and it is wonderful to see that. And of course the India Day Fair will be under that theme as well. Well, right now is time to say goodbye from this segment until tomorrow, when we'll bring to you the daily news and of course the weekly update with real estate update with Usha Chandra.